I thought that Darden didn't equivocate, but at least didn't make a full commitment to completely fund TOPS. Right. Darden and Angel both seem to say we're going to support TOPS and fund it completely. And number one, that's not realistic. Phyllis Taylor, whose husband came up with the idea of the Taylor plan, says you got to put a limit. You just can't keep spending and spending and let the lid off. And so there's going to be, I think the next governor's going to have to sit down and do some fine tuning about requirements, about how far you go. Do you put a limit based on funding? And those are reasonable questions to ask when you've got a tight state budget, when you need to do so much to deal with health care and so many other areas. To say you got a knee-jerk, oh, we're going to support TOPS no matter what. I think I would be more leery of a candidate that kept promising we're going to completely fund it, it's never going to change, rather than one says, let's take our, let's look at it. We need, the concept is great, but let's be realistic in what we can do and what works best to get the best return for the dollar. So Darden did a little bit more of that. Yeah. Angel, quite frankly, and Edwards.
Jeff, what were some of the other
well, I mean, I thought, on the rapid fire round at the end, I mean, some of them had differences on issues such as LGBT rights. Obviously, you had some of them taking pot shots at Governor Jindal, saying, that's not the presidential candidate I support. I'm undecided. I thought it was interesting, Steve, that Angel criticized Jindal for not approving the COLA increases for state retirees. I thought that was interesting, since he's considered sort of Jindal's candidate, or the one with the closest connections to Jindal. I think they all seem to indicate that they would be more focused on the state than the current governor. I thought Darden had some good quips about being governor while Jindal was away, right. And that he was, I guess, in his 98th day of serving as acting governor or something like that. So yeah, I think they're all going to be making a lot of jokes at Jindal's expense during the campaign because he's, I think, giving them a lot of fodder.
Is that
he might come back, though. I read Jeff's column. If the viewers out there don't know, so Jeff Crouere writes a great regular column, and your column today was, Governor, you got to come on home. So maybe he'll come back and moderate some of these debates. How would that be, Jeff? What do you think?
I would love it, because we're paying him a salary, Jim. I mean, I'd like him to do his job. I think he's been an absentee governor. I mean, we haven't gotten our money's worth. I'd love him to come back and finish his term with a flourish, maybe restore a little dignity to his, I guess, tenure as governor. But I don't see that happening, unfortunately.
I thought two areas that were weak by all three candidates were jobs and crime, particularly crime. Well, we're going to support the sheriffs, and we're going to, give everybody support. We've got a massive crime problem. Vitter, by the way, seems to be doing the most effective job of picking up on it. 23% of all the police killings in the country in this past year have come out of Louisiana. New Orleans is a war zone. I found that, Jeff and I have talked about the fact I've moved down there on weekends for about the last 6 months and live a daily life in New Orleans. And let me tell you what, after 11 o'clock at night, you keep your guard up. I got up the other morning to go to the airport at 6. The streets were covered with homeless people. A lot of real strange folks walking around. I didn't feel safe. My point is that crime element all over the country, and whether in the state, Baton Rouge, Shreveport, and very few specifics about the crime element. What are you going to do? Do you do what has worked so well in New York and other places with stop and frisk? What do you do about guns for those who have been challenged mentally in the court system? In so many ways, what would you put metal detectors up at every movie theater and a restaurant in the state? I'd like to see some specifics, and we got some real vague generalities out of the candidates. I thought that was the weakest part of the debate tonight, was a failure to address a huge problem in Louisiana, and that's keeping us all safe.
Jeff, I know that you're very sensitive to that. Which candidate do you find perhaps had the best answers regarding that?
Well, I mean, I was surprised to hear John Bell Edwards talk about his family's law enforcement history. That was impressive. That goes back so many different generations. So certainly he came across as someone who is cognizant of the needs of law enforcement, supportive of law enforcement. And that's what I'm worried about right now in Louisiana. We've got officers that are doing a very dangerous job, as Jim said, in New Orleans. We don't have enough officers. We've got 2 incidents in recent days in which officers have been killed. We had 2 more in New Orleans in recent months to add to the list. And it's really getting bad in certain areas. And I saw a national piece about crime going up big time across the country. And they listed New Orleans as one of the cities where we've seen a major surge. So I think the crime issue in New Orleans needs to be one of the top issues in this governor's race, because Governor Jindal really hasn't addressed it. I mean, Governor Jindal hasn't been very interested in the needs of New Orleans. And I mean, he's just hadn't been interested in much of anything. But I mean, this is certainly a big problem. The street that I grew up on, one of the streets uptown, a nice, very nice street, just saw there was an armed robbery there. These are areas where you didn't normally see that kind of criminal behavior, but now, you know, it's going on pretty regularly in New Orleans. And
Jeff, if I could pick up on that, usually in the evening, Fridays and Saturday evenings particularly, you know, I'm in the quarter. I'll go up to Cater Street, up to a few little restaurants up that way, or walk over off of Bourbon Street, and you see state troopers you run into. They're there in the city. They're not pleased about being in the city. Everyone tells me they're not enjoying it down there. They see a big mess down there, not a real coordinated effort. You see in the French Quarter, for example, you got your own little private police force that is funded through private donations. I sent a check in here not too long ago, and it's off-duty police officers that go around in little four-wheelers, and that's done privately. But the state troopers don't like being down there, and they say, listen, you know, we ought to be back doing our job in the district that we're paid to be in Monroe and Shreveport, so we're not being fair to the rest of the state by dealing with these issues. So there's no overall coordinated plan about what we do with this whole crime problem, and I think you're going to see some pot shots. But again, I make that point. I would have thought that any of these candidates would have said, listen, I've sat down with law enforcement officials. I've got a very specific plan. Let me tell you what I'm going to do. 1, 2, 3. We didn't get that tonight. We've not gotten it out of Vitter, and that's a disappointment as an issue so important that none of the candidates seem to be addressing. Right. The only thing Vitter has said is that he supports a permanent state police presence down in New Orleans, as opposed to what goes on now where, you know, you had periodic requests made and it's just sort of patchwork sort of a thing. But Vitter says he wants that permanent state police presence. And obviously that might not be popular with the troopers. And certainly I don't know about how that's going to get funded. But it's his realization that the forces of the NOPD are not going to be up to adequate levels anytime soon.
You know, one of the things I've been wondering, hearing those commercials on Jeff's radio station, WGSO, heard it yesterday, heard it today from David Vitter, and I was just wondering, is this workable? I mean, I think he's talking about training, and the state police train the troops and to permanently train them. Is he talking about actually having a presence? But, you know, if I'm the mayor of New Orleans or even Jefferson Parish, there's a lot of crime here in Jefferson Parish. I mean, you know, do I want this? You know, if I don't ask, you know, the governor for assistance, do I want the governor to come in to impose upon my city? You know, no telling what might happen. Jim, now you've been in state government, and insurance commissioner, secretary of state, and state senator. Is, you know, regardless as to how there is presenting this, is this an issue, or am I blowing smoke here?